You sit quietly, trying not to struggle as the nurse fumbles with the needle and says flatly, "Sorry, you have such tiny veins." His voice is calm, just a hint of irritation, like maybe you're making him late for his lunch break. This is the third day in a row you've been at the transfusion center at the hospital, and each morning you awake and you put your best self together, your best dress, your best shoes, your best hair and jewelry, because the better you look, the better your treatment will go, the better outcome of your illness. Or maybe they'll just say that they were wrong. You were so good looking and young that this illness actually doesn't even affect you, because these things don't happen to good looking people. The nurse pokes 3 more times, then he shakes his head and calls for Judy. Judy's an older woman with a kind smile and confident demeanor. She has on floral scrubs and hot pink Crocs that match her lipstick. She looks at you and she says, "You're just so tiny, we're having a bit of trouble today." She pulls up a stool and lifts your pant leg up and grabs your ankle. She nods and says, "Let's try this, you have a good vein right there," pointing to your foot. You wonder for a moment what that will feel like, as you've never had a needle in your foot. You're also happy that you shaved your legs that morning. Your heart quickens and your palms start to sweat. But then you catch a glimpse of yourself in the reflection of a TV screen, and you see that you look pretty. You could be an actress, a model, an older, white Selena Gomez. So you calm down. Selena isn't sick, and neither are you. The IV in your foot is successful. You are surprisingly comfortable as the nurse programs the pump and asks if you need anything. You say you would just like to see the latest issue of Vogue. She smiles politely and returns with People and U.S. News. It's not Vogue, but you're agreeable. About 10 minutes into the treatment, you start to notice a metallic taste in your mouth. Your neurologist told you that this would happen and not to be alarmed. She also told you that your ankles would swell, that you'd develop cankles. Okay, she didn't say that, but you know that's what she meant. You chew a piece of gum to minimize the metallic taste, cinnamon gum. And for a moment you recall that time that Dad brought you several packs of Big Red after he missed your dance recital because he'd been too drunk to drive to it. Cinnamon anything has always been your favorite. And Dad always brought you Red Hots, Fireballs, and Cinnamon Jolly Ranchers as a peace offering for his booze-filled shenanigans. Where is Dad, you wonder? You glance at the pump and see that you still have another 56 minutes. The methylprednisone drips slowly and looks like water. You imagine for a moment that it is water. Not a big dose of powerful synthetic steroids that are shrinking those 3 lesions on your spine. But back to Dad. Too bad there wasn't an IV drip that could shrink his drinking. You know, only 1 drink a night, not 10. You sigh heavily and shift your weight. Your foot feels itchy from the catheter. You notice your lovely pedicure from last Wednesday. That had been a good day. Dad had called mostly coherent and you had a nice talk. You didn't tell him about the illness or the upcoming treatment. You didn't mention the meats or the lesions or the weekly injections that made you feel like you had the flu for 2 days after. You'd been sick for 3 years, but you kept it from him. You treated him somewhat like a child, your child. He lost that place in Dad in your life when he was caught with the prostitute. Or maybe it was when you left the family, or when he called from jail on your wedding day, sobbing. It wasn't really the gift you were hoping for. But Dad is Dad, and you can't help but think how much your husband is just like him. Someone you always had to draw out, someone you always had to be strong for, someone you really couldn't be honest with. You look around the room and see big beige leather chairs. They are empty. A slow day at the infusion center. It feels lonely. You feel lonely, but you won't admit it. You asked your husband to come, but he said he didn't like hospitals. You didn't push the issue. He asked if you were scared. You said no. He said he would come if you really needed him to, but you didn't want to have to play that card. You wanted him to come because it was the right thing to do. It would mean less now. Besides, you were bold and beautiful, the white Selena Gomez. You didn't need Justin Bieber. You don't need a leading man. You don't need anyone.
The Boss. Daddy and I stood next to a massive chestnut brown stallion with a black mane and a black tail that swished like the spring breeze had woken it up. I was as tall as the horse's legs, and Daddy stood even with the saddle, which he just flung over its back and buckled around its belly. He patted the horse on its snout and said, "Just remember, a horse needs to know who's boss." It was a concept vaguely understood by my 8-year-old brain. I was the youngest of 3 and a shy child, longing to have friends but afraid to express myself. Daddy, having been a solitary child himself, got his first horse when he was 10. He said he had horse blood in his veins. "Good boy, Fleetfoot," Daddy said, crooning in the ear of this huge beast, then turned and slapped his bottom. "You're the second fastest Tennessee walker in Monroe County, aren't you, boy?" It was 1953, outside of Bloomington, Indiana, a town proud to be in the county of Monroe. Daddy and I had walked the mile from our house to the aging wooden barn where Fleetfoot was housed. It was our Saturday morning ritual. "Watch this," Daddy would call as we entered the rickety gate to the corral, where idle weeds competed with dusty earth that rose up in clouds when stirred by the movement of hooves. He would mount Fleet, sweet talk flowing, and click his tongue, while the elegant horse smoothly transitioned from walking to Tennessee walking, a fast walk where he lifted his feet like he was tap dancing and held his head high, nodding in rhythm with his feet. Then Daddy would click again, praising him while he nudged with his heels. Fleet would speed up to a trot, then a canter, then a gallop. Daddy had taught me the names of the gates. This particular Saturday, I was mesmerized as I watched, my eyes locked on the spectacle. I felt so entranced, I wondered if I, too, had horse blood in my veins. Daddy must have known. "It's your turn," he shouted. "Are you ready? Is this your day?" Stunned, I whispered, "Yes," my heart twisting frantically, like a fish being released from the hook. Daddy dismounted and adjusted the footholds to the length of my legs. He lifted me up so I could put my left foot in the stirrup, and before he could help me, I threw my right leg over the saddle, yanked myself up, and found a comfortable position. I felt elated, as if I owned the fields that beckoned beyond the barn. Was this how I felt when I took my first step? The sturdy curves of leather created a bucket that held me as I clutched the saddle horn. I straightened my back and lifted my head skyward, the clouds almost close enough to kiss. A gentle wind tickled my ears. I was ready. Daddy held the reins in front of Fleet, smiled at me and nodded. "I'll lead Fleet through his paces," he said, "and you hold on. Tell me if you want me to stop." I nodded back. Walking was bumpy, so I pushed my sneakers into the stirrups and held on with my legs. The Tennessee walk was smooth as a boiled potato, and I relaxed into the dance. My jeans slid on the saddle, so I gripped tighter and my hips twisted with every turn. Something was loosening in my heart. It was a kind of devotion to this animal that I quickly began to feel I knew intimately. I held on when Fleet began to trot and then canter, a 3-beat rhythm that Daddy told me was Fleet's way of speeding up, but not breaking into a full gallop. "We'll save the gallop for another day," Daddy told me, as we stopped to rest. I looked down at him, his eyes squinting in the sun, his smile proud. He let me dismount without help. "How was it, Paddle Wheel?" he asked, calling me by my favorite nickname. My cheeks were on fire. "I loved it." I rubbed Fleet's chin, and he lifted his black lips as if he was smiling. "He knew you were the boss, and he wanted to please you. That's how it works." Daddy stroked Fleet's neck. "It's a partnership. Your job is to know your horse's needs and protect him if he gets frightened. You'll learn to read him when he's scared, but never let him know that you're afraid." Daddy's eyebrows furrowed, and he looked the way he did when he wanted to be taken very seriously. "Yes, Daddy, I understand." He handed me the reins, and together we led Fleet back to the barn while I thought about what had just happened. What I understood was that everything was different now. I felt as good as when I first learned to hang by my heels on the bars in the backyard. But the sense of power I experienced was brand new, and so palpable I could almost taste it.